Hi there, and welcome to another one of my string library demo videos. This time I'll be looking at Hyperion by Soundiron. It's not a sponsored video, but they did send me a copy of the library for free. So this is a very substantial product. It's intended to be their flagship string library, and in my mind it's a real contender for the top spot in terms of being just a workhorse, bread and butter string library. The ensemble size is 30 players, so it's a sort of medium-size orchestral string section, and it's something that's apparently been in the works for about 10 years. Even though it's not trying to be one of those niche character libraries, it does have quite a particular angle to offer, and that is the fact that the samples are, in general, very close sounding, very dry sounding, so you really get a lot of that grit and presence that isn't always the case in some of the lusher sounding libraries. So just for a bit of context, I work as a professional composer. I do these YouTube videos just in my spare time, and so I'm not really here to do a complete walkthrough. Actually, they have an official walkthrough that's really good if you just want to hear every patch. This is just my first initial impressions as somebody who uses a lot of string libraries, and hopefully it'll be useful to you. So the long story short is it gets a thumbs up from me. I'm going to structure this video in 3 parts. So in the first part, I just want to showcase how it just sounds, in my opinion, really great out of the box and seems to do the basic stuff really well. So just a quick fly through. Then in the second part, I want to look into things that are a bit more unique and specific about this library. Some of the extra articulations that I wouldn't necessarily expect to have, especially for a library at this price point. And then in the third part of the video, I'll just talk about a few criticisms and gripes that I have with the library and some concluding thoughts. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I'm going to start with this full ensemble patch. This won't showcase any of the legatos. This is just a kind of sketch patch that's designed for bashing stuff into the keyboard, which is my favorite way to go. I'm using this performance patch, which is geared towards that, which allows you to play shorts and longs. So and you can see that I'm using a breath controller here. That's just controlling the dynamics. I'm also using vibrato by the bite on my breath and bite controller, and that's down here. Everything else is in its default state. By default, it seems to be maxing out the volume a bit here, which is a little frustrating. So I'm just going to bring the volume down here. So you can do a lot. That's just the performance patch, as I say, in its most raw form. If we switch over to the mixer here, because I have the multi-mic version of the patch loaded up, currently it's only using the stage and the far mics, which gives you a little bit of a lusher sound. It also has a little bit of reverb on by default. As you'll hear, even with all of the mic positions turned on, there really isn't a lot of tail to the sound. You're getting real release samples there. Let's have a listen to the stage mics, which are the kind of pièce de résistance of this library, at least according to the marketing. These are essentially just big fat condenser mics, really close to each musician. They have a really fat sound. Whoa, that's nice. I love that. So that's lovely. The feel of this patch, and the feel of pretty much all of the patches that I've played anyway, is generally very consistent, very predictable, no nasty surprises there. It feels like a modern level of production value. In general, it's very clean. I haven't come across any bumpiness in the response, so it's very playable, and that's a big win for me as somebody who likes to play stuff in and not do a lot of editing in post. If I just play a sustains patch here, and turn on the legato, which is, by the way, anything that's turned on legato here is kind of fake legato or scripted legato. Basically, the way this is organized, which I found a little bit confusing, is you have masters, which contain most of the articulations, but not the true legato. For the real legato, you need to load the legato instrument. Oh, there's also longs in addition to legato. So for me, this is a tiny bit confusing, but I think longs contain... Well, let's have a look. What does longs contain? So I did find when I was searching, for example, for like a harmonic sustain, I wasn't quite sure whether it would be under longs or whether it would be under expressions or legato maybe, or in the master. But I think the rule of thumb is generally you load up the master unless you want to do legato, true legato, in which case you load up the legatos. So this is a longs, first violin's longs patch. By clicking here in the slot, brings up the list of articulations there, which is quite extensive. Let's now get into the violin one's legato. So I'll load up the legato patch and give you a little blast. So this is one quirk that irks me slightly, is when I hold the sustain pedal down, say if I'm anticipating doing a repeated note legato, if I keep it down and then transition to another note, it'll play both of those notes and just stack them, rather than keeping the legato going on a monophonic line. I find that a little bit of a strange design choice, given that it's in a solo mode. It does have a duet mode, which allows you to do a sort of polyphonic legato, but as long as the lines don't come within half an octave. So it's not a true poly legato like some other libraries. So it's a beautiful, detailed sound. It's the kind of sound that is still very hard to achieve with physical modeling type instruments. There's just so much kind of grit and texture and color just going on in those recordings. You can play a really wide range of speeds with this one patch. Something like that phrase, it sounds okay, but it would help it a little bit if I added this feature, which is accenting the first note of each set of notes. So if I'm playing a 3-note legato line, it accents the first of those 3, and then on the connected notes it doesn't accent. So something like this kind of simulates that kind of like bow change. So for runs, that could be really handy. So it gives it the feeling of being a lot more agile once you start bringing that in. But of course, if you know you're going to be playing medium or slow tempo material, or if you're going to go super slow, you might even want to increase the attack. I think this only applies to the first note of each legato phrase as well. So it kind of just avoids any bumps, basically. But one thing that I do like, again, just sticking with the core stuff here, is that you have the option of switching to a specific dynamic, which you might think, well, why not just keep it in the full dynamic range? But actually, this kind of surprised me. It's quite a nice way to do it. If I know in advance I'm going to be doing a piano phrase, this is going to make it, you know, stay within that kind of super vibey, low dynamic sound. So there's the opportunity to be a little bit more nuanced there. Similarly, if I go to F, I guess it's just helping the instrument understand what you're going for musically. It's just kind of scoping into a particular dynamic area there, which is quite handy. I want to just give you a blast of the cellos now, get something in the lower register. Let's do some cello legatos. So I'm going to turn the reverb off for this one, and let's just have all of the mics. So you can see this little thing hopping about. That's adjusting the speed of the legato transition according to my playing style. But if I deselect that and maybe just bring it down a bit, you can hear a little bit more of the in-betweenness there. So sometimes it's good when programming to be quite intentional about that rather than just leaving it up to the algorithm. But super clean. This library definitely feels like it's going for that workhorse, fairly neutral thing, compared to something like afflatus strings, where every patch kind of has a particular musical vibe. This is just going for like clean and consistent, as you can sort of tell from the UI design. You know, it's like clean, minimal, reliable. There's no noticeable latency, really. I mean, compared to something like CSS, this is incredibly fluid to play. Oops, gone below the range of the instrument there. Again, we can scope into the kind of musical material. So if we know that we want something a bit more spiky and a bit more accented, you know, we can kind of add a bit. I mean, that's struggling to do what I want it to do. In that scenario, I might be better off using one of the patches from the master. Yeah, unfortunately, I do have to load up a separate instrument instance to explore those options rather than just getting to them from this menu here. But it's fine, I can deal with it. You also have your release, like real release samples here, and you can adjust the release volume. Let's listen to the simulated vibrato. So if I just turn this off and just use the simulated vibrato by learning. It's just doing a little bit of volume modulation there by the sound of it. And then you can use the two together as well. You're not going to get as present a vibrato sound as you would in a really small chamber ensemble thing, but it would have been nice to have the option of making that more kind of intense. I guess it's trying to be useful in as broad a number of cases as possible, but I personally love the sound of like really super intense fast vibrato, especially on high lines. So as far as legatos go, you basically have two main types, your standard one and then more of a portamento or gliss vibrato. You just play a bit more softly on the velocity and it'll trigger that portamento. Sounds really solid. Yeah, really nice. Let's just check out some of the staccatos. So this is staccato dynamic, meaning that it has the full dynamic range. I'm going to make these velocity sensitive as well, so it's going to use a combination of where this is set and the attack of my fingers. These are all the ones that we have. We've got different dynamic layers again, but the main ones are spiccato, staccato, and then staccato long. So spiccato sounds like this. Let me remove the space so you can really hear it as well and switch on all of the mics again. Sounds great. Maybe a tiny bit of extra dynamic range on the super hard ones would have been nice, but maybe if we use spiccato F, see what that... Yeah, so a little bit more bite there. Let's check out... so you already heard the staccatos, I started with those. Let's have a listen to staccato long dynamic. So that's nice. So that kind of covers your bases pretty well. And then if you want, even longer than that, probably you'd need to use maybe a performance patch, maybe combine a spiccato or a staccato with a sustain patch. So there are various ways you could go about it. The performance patch is quite versatile though. So next, sticking with the theme of just covering all our basics, I'm going to load up an ensemble patch and we can check out the pizzicatos, tremolos, things that you would typically just expect to have in a workhorse string library before getting on to some of the more fruity articulations in the second part of the video. There's quite a long release here, you might notice, which is, fine for a lot of situations. It's easy to release, it's easy to remove release, quite hard to add it if it's not baked into the sample. So if we want to tighten up the sound, we can do this. Just change that, and then also we could make it super tight. So, really great sound. It's like small but large at the same time. What if we just listen to these stage mics? And just the close mics. We have Bartok pizzicato. All really tight, all really nice under the fingers, really consistent. Col Legnos. Let's check out the tremolos. I'm going to use my breath controller for this one. These are some of the nicest tremolos I've heard. Very happy with those. Really full sound. Again, right now it loads by default with these two. I guess the stage kind of gives you the meat of the sound, and then the far just adds a little bit of dimension if you want it, but just the stage on its own sound great. Let's just have a quick listen to, say, just the viola trills. We haven't really heard the violas yet. Pretty standard. I won't spend too much time on these. One thing to note is on the violins 1, you have a few extra options, so you can go up to a minor or major third, and then the slow trills also go up to a fifth. So here's trill, fast, major third. Just a nice to have. Before I move on to the second part of the video, I'll just give you a quick blast of the violas and then the basses, just to give you a sense of how they sound. So I have found that the faster response on the violas feels a little strange. There's some slightly severe processing going on there, so I would probably want to leave that maybe somewhere in the middle or towards the low side and turn the auto response off. That sounds a lot more pleasant to my ear. I'll turn this accent up a little bit. Let's have a listen to some of the more portamento transitions. It'd be nice to maybe be able to bring down the level of that transition slightly. I don't think there's a way to do that. I'll just give you a quick blast of the basses as well. Let's load up the master patch. So I'll put on the fake legato with the sustains here. So, you may find that you can do everything you want to do with this master patch if it's not a super exposed line, especially with the basses. Maybe true legato isn't necessary, and then you have the convenience of being able to switch easily between different articulations if that's your thing. Spiccato. Performance patch. I could see myself using these performance patches a lot, even though the legato isn't quite as detailed. Overall, the core stuff is all very playable. I don't find myself tripping up too often, and if there is a little phrase that isn't quite coming out right, usually I can get where I need to go by using an alternative combination of articulations. A huge benefit for me of dry libraries is that they blend much more easily with other libraries that you might own. And also, it gives you a far wider range of creative possibilities because you can dial in the exact amount of ambience or washing out of the sound that you want. You're not kind of forced into a particular lush sound just because that's what the library has to offer. So I wish that all developers would just do really precise, really nice, clean, playable libraries that were completely dry, and then give me full control over how they're situated in the mix, personally. I know that some other people might like to just load up something that sounds great and lush and off they go. Next, let's move on and have a look at some of the more bonus features of the library. So this will include slightly unusual articulations that you might not have covered elsewhere, and just slightly unique ways of doing things, other little bits and pieces under the hood, and so on. So let's dive in. So this definitely won't be an exhaustive list. Again, this is just things that jumped out to me as particularly useful. But the first category is expressions. These are pre-recorded swells. So we have 8-count and 4-count crescendos and decrescendos at different dynamic levels. So for example, we have 8-count crescendo piano to fortissimo. Sounds like this. This is just the violas. So there's different ways you could work with these. For example, if you set auto release, then it means that when you stop holding the note, it'll release. But you can have it so that it'll play through. So you can let go and it will continue. And this can almost be quite a nice little compositional jumping off point. There's something about pre-recorded swells and crescendos that have so much more extra realism than if you were to do a mod wheel ride or use a breath controller. I guess there's something innately musical about a crescendo or a decrescendo, and you can really sense some of the player's expression and musicality in those. So I always like to use them when I can, when an opportunity comes up in my writing kind of organically. Let's have a listen to the sforzando. So yeah, just a really nice thing to have in your toolkit. Let's load up the basses this time, and I'm going to load up the effects patch. Ponticello sustain. Just quite an unusual sound and still recognisably a string instrument, but I could imagine even just layering that into something could give it a really interesting tone. Then you have these cluster stabs. We can maybe adjust the release time. There's no round robining here. But a lot of these are quite similar, so in context, you could probably get away with doing something like that. What I like about that is it's suitably generic, that I wouldn't feel like I was cheating too much. I could see that being useful in a fairly wide range of circumstances. Another nice to have feature that stood out to me is the ability to blend between different articulations if they're set to the same key switch. This is something that some sample players offer, such as the sine player, But for example, if we set, let's take a tremolo, it's a classic one. Oh no, we can't because this is the effects patch. Okay, so I guess I'll load up the master. So yeah, a classic thing in orchestration might be to have half sustains and half tremolo within a section rather than everybody playing tremolo. So what we could do is assign each of these to the same key switch, C-2 in this case. Then we can use this button here, select A and then select B. And then we can learn the MIDI of this to a knob on my keyboard. I'm going to use this fader here. And that's going to blend between the two articulations. So we could find the blend that we want and just leave it set. That might be something that we want to do. Or we can actually have that as a kind of transition. You know, we could just gradually transition into tremolo and transition out. And that can be quite an expressive thing to do. Let's try those Ponticello sustains into just like a normal sustain, see how that sounds. Maybe a piano sustain might be cool. I mean, I could easily turn that into a really cool pad. I like that they kept the pitch wheel active. In some libraries they just lock it out, but even a dodgy pitch bend can sound quite good. It's nice that they've left that. That's just one gripe that I have sometimes with libraries. No pitch bend for you. Let's talk about light and fluffy articulations now. So the first one is sordinos. We have real sordino articulations, which is quite rare unless you buy a specialist library. They're just for the first violins. So I'll just show off the piano patch there. And I'll take off the legato and just play some chords and stuff. I probably want a bit of extra attack here just to make everything nice and smooth. And let's have a listen to the legato. I would quite like the ability to turn down that portamento if possible. Also in the category of light and fluffy is flautandos, which I absolutely love when string libraries come with flautando patches because I just find them so useful. I'm going to turn off the legato here and just turn up the attack again. Let's maybe listen to all of the mics because I love it. Actually, no, let's listen to just the fa, see what that sounds like. Okay, and we'll just put them all back on again. There it is. Let's talk about a feature that's really built into the core of this library and works exactly the same with every patch, and that's this niente slider, which I really like, another little bonus feature. It makes it really easy to dial in the exact dynamic range that you want from this big knob. So if I bring it all the way down to the bottom, it's as if you're using CC11 and the mod wheel and doing the exact same thing, and it's going all the way down to 0 there, basically. So if I play... It's like you're turning the volume down as well, and you just get that extra bit of dynamic range, which can be really useful, especially for things like this pad where I want a really smooth attack, and especially if I have a big old reverb on there, I want it to go to nothing. The higher I raise this slider, the higher the kind of floor of the sample will be, so even if I'm not blowing at all into my breath controller, I still get quite a lot of volume here. And that can be helpful, especially with breath controllers actually, so that when you stop breathing it doesn't just cut the sound dead. But also, maybe you just want to hang out here. and keep a consistent volume and then just add some swells. That's something that I just find very elegant about this sample library, the way that it handles the dynamics there. While we're doing kind of paddy sounds, let's have a quick look at this reverb. I wouldn't normally touch inbuilt reverbs, not out of snobbery, but just because a lot of the time it's more convenient to bust the tracks together or use track sends in Logic or whatever to handle reverb to multiple instruments at once. But what I like about this reverb, apart from sounding decent, the default settings, you've got convolution as well, which has some quite fruity stuff in it. We'll just start with like the cathedral vibe, a really distant perspective. I think I'm going to switch to cellos so you can hear that, and add a bit of attack. Make sure the legato's turned off. Okay, here we go. Whack up the mix. Underground, that's quite a cool one. Let's listen to that. Whack up the size a little bit, see what that does. Maybe turn down the mix slightly. Pretty cool. And then we get into some really weird stuff. For example, I love this clang wah. It's quite weird and interesting. So some nice inspiration for more sound designy type stuff. We've got even more sort of weird sustain options here. We've got bridge sustain, behind sustain, harmonic sustain. So, just loads of textural stuff to explore in this library, in addition to Flortando and Ponticello. I won't play those now just for the sake of time. And then finally, the other thing that jumped out to me, which is of limited use somewhat, but I could see coming up realistically on project work, and that's the slow trills, which are also tempo syncable. And in the first violins, you get quite a few different options available. So let's have a listen to slow fourth down. I do find for these I need to turn off the release, otherwise it sounds a bit weird. Maybe actually turn the release volume down. Still getting a bit of a weird sound there, but anyway, you get the idea. What if I use sync? Not quite sure why that one's faster. But yeah, in theory, if I start my playback in the DAW, so it's a little bit janky, but you do have a lot of different intervals. Major third, minor second up. So that's quite good bread and butter type stuff. I could imagine that being quite handy. You can also have the speed follow the slider there if you select variable. So that's quite expressive as well, just in its own right. Just a nice little bonus to have that kind of feature included in a library like this. That concludes the section about bonus features and bits and pieces that stood out to me. Now I'd like to talk about just a few thoughts and criticisms, suggestions, or just things that I noticed. It's definitely not a perfect library, so even as you heard there at the end, I've encountered a few little bugs like that here and there. Nothing catastrophic, nothing that I couldn't work around in a job context, but it does feel like a version 1 still. A few other bugs that I encountered, for example, were sometimes loading up a patch and then using the soft velocity on a legato transition and just nothing happening where it would normally do a portamento transition. Also, I did find on the ensemble patch, if I had the fake vibrato and the blend vibrato up to max, I would get some strange wiggly pitch artifacts. There was a little bit of phasing on the dynamic crossfade of the bass's performance patch, so a few tiny things like that. If you're unlucky, you might encounter 1 or 2 bugs at this initial release version that I'm testing out right now. Then just to blast through a couple of other points or suggestions, I did find some of the patch organization a little bit confusing, and also if you're the sort of user who likes to be able to key switch between true legato and spiccato or whatever on a single instance of a patch, unfortunately you can't do that, so you'll just have to have a slightly different setup in the way that you work. But I'm sure there are probably good technical reasons for organizing it that way. I just sometimes found myself hunting around for articulations, not quite knowing where they were. With the full ensemble patches, there are certain articulations which don't appear, such as flautando, or I think harmonics as well as another one, presumably because they didn't record the basses doing some of those, I think. Nevertheless, it still would have been nice to have a full ensemble patch of, say, the flautando sustains that combines the articulations that we do have, and even just pitch stretching them a bit so that it covers the range of the keyboard. With the cluster stabs, I would have preferred fewer articulations but with more round robins. That would have been a bit more helpful to just ensure a lack of any kind of machine gunning or sample retriggering. And on the subject of short notes, I'm always a fan of libraries where there's a repeat key, or a way of playing measured tremolo type passages where you've got da-ga-da, 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 for example, multiple repeated notes on the same note. That can be quite fiddly to play if you're somebody who plays in real time. Just because this is something that comes up quite a lot, I actually commissioned a Logic script, like a custom Logic script in Logic Scripter plugin, which I talk about in another video. It's called Neat Repeat. I'll put a link to that in the description below if you're interested. It's just a free plugin. It's on GitHub. But yeah, it would have been nice if that was part of the functionality of the library as well. Just a little suggestion there. But yeah, apart from that, my only other negatives are just like, I would love even more sordinos. I would love, flautando basses, but it already feels like there's a generous amount of articulations in this library, to be honest. As you can probably tell from just the vibe of this video, I'm really digging the library so far. I'm looking forward to putting it to work. Again, just obviously full disclosure, I haven't used this on a ton of projects yet, still early days. But yeah, just in terms of the tone, that's the main thing, and the fact that it's dry and the fact that it just does the basics really well, I think that alone for me is probably worth the price tag. So that's it. Thank you very much for watching this. I hope you found it useful or entertaining. Let me know if you have any particular questions about the library. I'll do my best to answer them. But do go check out the official videos for more detailed and more thorough, methodical type walkthrough content. And in the meantime, happy composing. See you on the next video, and look forward to hearing from you in the comments. Take care.